The African Deep Dive podcast is brought to you by the African Technology Policy Studies Network. This podcast explores how science, technology, and innovation can drive sustainable development and global inclusion in Africa.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the place that takes those dense reports, those complex sources, and, well, boils them down for you.
We find the essential nuggets, the key takeaways you need.
Exactly, cutting through the noise. So today we're looking at climate action. Specifically, how promises turn into, well, action. Or sometimes how they don't.
We're jumping past the big Paris Agreement handshake in 2015.
Right, and getting into the nitty-gritty, the nationally determined contributions, NDCs.
NDCs are really the core of the Paris Agreement, aren't they? They're these voluntary national plans.
Self-determined, which is key.
Yes. Countries spell out what they intend to do about climate change over 5 years. Things like mitigation cutting emissions.
Or adaptation, getting ready for the changes.
And crucially, how they plan to actually implement it all.
And for Africa, this isn't just paperwork. The stakes are incredibly high.
Oh, absolutely. You know, the continent faces severe climate risks already.
Yeah, geography plays a part, the reliance on sectors like farming and tourism.
Which are very climate sensitive. And then there's the challenge of limited adaptive capacity generally.
So these NDCs, for many African nations, they're basically survival plans.
That's a good way to put it. And that leads us to the problem that popped up almost immediately after Paris.
Okay, what was that?
Well, you had all these pledges, these NDCs, but how do you track them systematically across 54 very different countries?
Ah, the data challenge.
Exactly. Countries were submitting reports, sure. Biennial updates, national communications.
But they were all over the place.
Completely. Different methods, different timing, different scope. You couldn't compare anything reliably.
So metaphorically, everyone was speaking a different language in their reports, making any kind of continent-wide view, well, impossible.
Pretty much. It was a real risk. Climate action could just stall because nobody had a standard way to see if things were actually moving forward.
Guesswork isn't good enough when the stakes are this high.
No, it isn't. And this gap, this lack of standardization, was spotted early on by the African Technology Policy Studies Network, ATPS, and their partners.
They saw the need for some kind of common tool.
A common diagnostic instrument, yeah.
And that, I take it, brings us to today's focus. The NDC Implementation Index.
That's the one. ATPS started working on this, developing and piloting it, way back in 2016.
Okay, so if Paris was the big plan and NDCs were the specific instructions.
Yeah, the index is like the inspector's checklist on the construction site.
Yeah, something like that. A way to see if the foundations are solid, if the wiring's going in right.
And it's really important how it inspects. It's not about ranking countries, like a league table.
Not who's best, who's worse.
No, not at all. It's fundamentally a diagnostic instrument. It looks at the enabling conditions.
Enabling conditions, like, is the system ready? Are the policies in place?
Precisely. Institutional readiness, policy integration, governance structures, the things you need before successful implementation can even happen.
So it flags where things are working well.
Yes, but maybe more importantly, it pinpoints where performance is low, where the blockages are, so countries can actually make adjustments.
That makes sense. You're measuring the potential, the setup, not just the final score.
Exactly. And by using the same ruler across different countries, you naturally create this potential for peer learning.
Right. Countries can see how others are tackling similar problems.
It encourages a kind of, let's say, healthy competition for improvement, continuous improvement.
Okay, let's dig into this index a bit more. A diagnostic tool looking at enabling conditions sounds complex. What exactly is it measuring? Where did they focus the research?
Well, it is multidimensional, gives a composite score, but it looks way beyond just, tons of CO2 reduced.
Way deeper?
Much deeper. It includes institutional readiness, like we said, how well climate policy is actually woven into national planning, the strength of the finance mechanisms, and the environment for getting technology deployed and sparking innovation.
So it's checking the engine and the fuel lines, not just the miles per gallon.
Got it.
What are the core components? You mentioned 5.
Yes, 5 specific areas, and they map pretty closely to what the Paris Agreement asks for in terms of implementation.
Okay, what are they?
First, governance. Are the roles clear? Is there coordination between ministries?
Right.
Finance.
Right.
Finance. Is the money there? Is it flowing to where it needs to go?
Crucial. Third.
Mitigation. Are the strategies for cutting emissions actually defined and being pursued.
Makes sense. Fourth.
Adaptation. Are measures to build resilience being put in place?
Okay, and the fifth one?
Fifth is measurement, reporting, and verification, or MRV.
Ah, MRV. We hear that acronym a lot in climate circles. Why is it one of the 5 pillars? Seems a bit technical.
It might sound technical, but it's fundamental. It's about trust, accountability.
How so?
Well, if countries are supposed to be working together globally, they need reliable, verifiable data to show they're actually doing what they promised.
Otherwise, pledges are just words.
Exactly. And international funders, for instance, need confidence that their money is achieving real results.
Yeah.
Robust MRV provides that confidence.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, this index wasn't just a theoretical exercise, right? They applied it.
Oh, yes. There was a regional project that used the index across 12 specific sub-Saharan African countries.
Which ones?
Let's see. Botswana, Cote d'Ivoire, Ethiopia, Ghana, Kenya, Namibia, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, Tanzania, Uganda, Zambia, and Zimbabwe.
Quite a diverse group. And the goal there?
Twofold, really. One, gauge how implementation was actually going compared to their NDC targets. And two, just as important, build the capacity of the local experts who would need to do this tracking long term.
So transparency and accountability, but also empowerment, making sure the political promises from Paris lead to actual measurable systems on the ground.
That's the core idea, yes.
Right. This is where it gets really interesting for me. Applying the index across those 12 countries, I bet the results weren't uniform. What did they find? Where was the action strong, and where did things start to lag?
You're right. The results were definitely not uniform, significant variations. But there was one area that consistently stood out as the strongest performer.
Oh, which one?
Governance.
Governance. Really? That surprises me a little. You often hear about bureaucracy being a hurdle in development contexts.
It does seem a bit counterintuitive, I agree. But the index suggests this strength is real, at least at the policy planning stage.
What's behind that strength?
It seems linked to having clear mandates for climate action, pretty well-coordinated governance structures on paper, and this is critically successfully integrating climate goals into national development plans and, importantly, into budgets.
Ah, linking it to the budget. That makes a difference.
It really does. It builds in accountability. So that foundational part, the policy framework, seems relatively strong in many cases.
Okay, good news on the governance front. The political will seems to be there in writing. So where does the implementation engine sputter? What was the biggest drag?
The biggest lag, the most critical barrier identified in the source material, was a combined area: finance and technology transfer.
Okay, money and tech. Not entirely surprising, perhaps, but tell me more.
Countries are really struggling on two fronts here. First, just mobilizing enough money, both from domestic sources and internationally. Second, actually scaling up the deployment of the innovative low-carbon technologies they need.
So if governance is the solid foundation, finance and tech are the missing engine parts.
That's a fair analogy. The reports call finance and tech essential enablers. Without them, those well-designed mitigation and adaptation plans just sit there.
They remain paper plans.
Exactly. Think about it. A country might have a great solar power policy, but if they can't finance the big projects or get access to the latest battery storage tech,
The policy doesn't translate into watts. Does the index point fingers more at lack of external aid or failures in using domestic resources?
it suggests both are issues, but highlights mobilizing domestic resources as a major challenge. You can't just wait for aid.
You mentioned the workshop delegates visited the Ethiopian Science Museum. I guess that drove home this technology point.
It seems so. A powerful visual reminder that innovation is critical, but access to that innovation and the funds to implement it is often the missing link.
So beyond the big hurdles of money and tech, the index also flagged issues with data, right? Problems with coordination, maybe even trust.
Absolutely. This ties back to that MRV pillar we talked about. A really widespread problem was the lack of solid, reliable data systems. And yes, institutional friction.
Let's get specific. The workshops in Addis Ababa brought out some real-world examples.
They did. Delegates shared some very candid insights.
Like from Ghana, what did institutional friction look like there?
In Ghana, the delegates talked about officials actually being reluctant to share climate-related data across different government departments.
Why? What was the concern?
Fear, perhaps. Concern about how the data might be interpreted, maybe reflecting poorly on their own ministry's performance. It turns into a kind of turf war that blocks the flow of essential information.
Wow. So internal politics literally hindering climate tracking. What about data being scattered?
That came up strongly with Botswana. The issue wasn't necessarily secrecy, but fragmentation. Things were happening, projects were running,
But no one was tracking it centrally.
or at least not documenting it in a standardized way that fed into the index's requirements. Data was stuck in different ministry silos, making the overall picture invisible.
Progress was happening, but it wasn't being counted in a useful way.
Precisely. And similar stories elsewhere. Nigeria reported challenges getting all the necessary government stakeholders involved in data collection,
Meaning some ministries just weren't participating?
making it impossible to track progress in those areas. And Namibia flagged an even more basic issue. Some crucial data just hadn't been collected at all, or what was collected couldn't be verified.
Okay, this paints a picture of, yeah, well, it sounds like policy without practice. You have these good governance structures, these climate plans integrated into national strategies.
Right, the blueprints look good.
But the actual implementation gets bogged down by these system failures, fragmented data, institutions not talking to each other, maybe a lack of political will to force that data sharing and budget alignment.
That sums it up perfectly. And that's the value of the index. It makes that specific disconnect visible. It shows that getting the enabling conditions right, the plumbing, the wiring,
Institutional frameworks and data systems
is just as critical as having the ambitious policy goals in the first place.
Yeah.
And interestingly, the delegates themselves found huge value beyond just getting a score. It became a platform for dialogue, for policy learning.
How so?
Well, take the participants from Kenya. They apparently went in thinking the index was just about quantitative measurement, getting a number.
Right, a performance score.
But they quickly realized it was more of a diagnostic tool. It was about assessing how to improve those enabling conditions we just discussed, how to make implementation possible.
That's a crucial shift in mindset from how did we score to how can we fix the underlying issues.
Exactly. And that focus naturally leads to peer learning.
Which happened at the Addis Ababa workshop.
Very much so. It was a great example of South-South cooperation. For instance, Zambia shared their experience setting up a national carbon framework.
Oh, interesting. What did that involve?
They developed a specific climate change act designed to regulate carbon markets within Zambia. That's a concrete model other countries could look at adapting.
Sharing practical solutions, not just problems.
Right. And Ethiopia, being the host, also showcased their own efforts.
Like what?
The things like their massive tree planting initiative, the Green Legacy program, and their significant investments in renewable energy. Seeing that scale of action is inspiring.
So these regional platforms become key for sharing best practices, maybe harmonizing methods.
Absolutely. And the delegates recognize that this kind of collaboration also strengthens Africa's collective voice in global climate negotiations.
Makes sense. So based on all these findings, the strengths in governance, the weaknesses in finance and data, the value of learning, what did the delegates recommend? What were the concrete next steps agreed upon?
They came up with 4 key action-focused resolutions.
Okay, let's hear them. Number 1.
First, institutionalize the index. The idea is for governments to formally embed this tool within their national climate systems.
Make it part of the regular process.
Yes, and importantly, part of ministerial budgets. So it's not a one-off study, but a continuous diagnostic tool for improvement with dedicated resources.
Smart. Ties it to funding and makes it sustainable. What was the second resolution?
Second, strengthen national data ecosystems. This tackles that fragmentation and data gap head-on.
Requires investment, I assume.
It's a significant investment, yes, in building robust national systems that follow the UNFCCC's TACCC principles.
TACCC. Remind us what that stands for.
Transparency, accuracy, consistency, comparability, and completeness. Basically, data needs to be reliable, understandable, measured the same way over time, comparable across countries, and, well, complete.
High standards, but necessary for trust.
Definitely. And strengthening these systems also means better engagement with non-government actors, civil society, the private sector, who often hold valuable data.
Okay. And the third resolution must have tackled the money and tech gap.
It did. The third goal is to mobilize sustainable resources. This emphasizes moving beyond just waiting for international aid.
More proactive strategies.
Right. Developing comprehensive national climate finance plans, making sure NDC priorities are actually in domestic budgets, and critically building a pipeline of bankable, investment-ready projects.
NDC-ready project.
That was the term used. Projects ready for investment, perhaps using things like green bonds or public-private partnerships.
Got it. And the fourth resolution, back to collaboration.
Yes. Fourth was to foster peer learning. formalizing that South-South cooperation, using regional platforms consistently to share what works, harmonize approaches, and strengthen that collective bargaining power globally. So you see, the NDC Implementation Index isn't just another report. It's proven to be a really unique tool. It measures progress, yes, but maybe more importantly, it builds the capacity of the technical people on the ground doing the data collection and analysis across Africa.
Turning them into champions for data-driven policy.
Exactly.
So let's recap the core tension this deep dive has revealed. On one hand, you have surprisingly strong governance structures and political will, at least on paper.
Right. The foundation looks decent in many places.
But then you hit these major implementation roadblocks, the fragmented data, the institutions not sharing information, and that persistent critical gap in finance and technology.
The blueprints are good, but the materials and tools to actually build are either missing or locked away.
That visit to the Ethiopian Science Museum really resonates here, a reminder that innovation is essential, but it needs enabling. So here's something for you, our listener, to think about. If governance provides the foundation and finance and technology are the engines needed for climate action, how do countries break through that institutional reluctance, that data fragmentation the index clearly identifies?
How do they unlock the resources and information needed to turn those impressive blueprints into real, verifiable action on the ground?
What's the mechanism to enforce the kind of transparency that those TACCC principles demand? Something to mull over. Keep digging, keep learning. Thanks for joining us for the deep dive.
Thank you for listening. Join us every Thursday for more insightful conversations.